It's unbelievable how big this story was. I was 16 years old when this happened, and I had no sense of the scope of what it was. I mean, as I got into doing the reporting, it just kept amazing me how the story kept unfolding and how big it got. I guess eight or 9 months that we've spent working on this, and I've done more than 50 interviews with friends, family, prosecutors, retired homicide detectives, former FBI behavioral profilers, you name it. It's been a lot of work. This was a landmark case for criminal justice. This marked the first time in U.S. history that a serial killer was caught using DNA evidence. And it was the first capital murder trial in American history based on DNA. This is Southern Nightmare, the story of how the Southside Strangler was brought to justice. The Southside Strangler ultimately killed 5 women and raped at least 10 more that we know of. The first Richmond area murder happened in September of 1987. That was Debbie Davis, a Style Weekly employee. That was followed very quickly about 2 weeks later with the murder of Dr. Susan Helms, a neurosurgery intern at the Medical College of Virginia. Both women were found in virtual identical circumstances, bound, strangled, raped. The third victim was Diane Cho, who was found, she was a 15-year-old freshman at Manchester High School in Chesterfield County, and she was raped and strangled in her bedroom while her parents and her brother slept in their bedrooms right nearby. The final victim was Sue Tucker, who was an editor for a federal magazine. She lived in Arlington, Virginia, and she was murdered in her townhouse Thanksgiving weekend, 1987. Later, it would be determined that he had probably killed Washington, D.C. attorney Carolyn Hom in her home in Arlington in 1984. The Southside Strangler gained entry through unlocked windows usually, then would ransack the house carefully looking for items that he could use to tie women up. He would hide in a closet, wait for them to come home.
But he would stake each one of them out. He'd go to Cloverleaf Mall, he'd pick his victims. Then he'd follow them for a week and then break in while they were gone.
Debbie Davis, who had worked at Style, had also been a bookstore employee that she worked part-time at the Walden bookstore there at Cloverleaf Mall. And they later found that Dr. Helms had bought a book from her. The check was written by Dr. Helms, endorsed on the back by Debbie Davis for Walden Books, which gives you chills when you think about it. These murders had Richmond terrified, particularly single women. They stopped, some of them stopped sleeping at home. They would stay with relatives, or they would walk to the cars in 2s and 3s. They would stay at friends' houses. It really panicked the entire city.
I got a lot of pressure on me to try to clear the case, but it was a cooperative effort by probably 30 investigators. It's the first experience I had with a serial killer, too. Now, I went to Quantico when they first organized the behavior science right before this case.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. They gave us 27 characteristics to look for in a suspect. 25 or 27, Matt Spencer.
He was a recently paroled inmate who had been released to a parolee pre-release program to a halfway house here in Richmond. He was living within a mile or two of two of the victims in the South Richmond part of the city. And so he was from Arlington, Northern Virginia. He was let go from the halfway house during Thanksgiving weekend to visit family, and that's when he committed the murder of Sue Tucker up in Arlington.
And what we didn't release on Diane's show, it was a figure 8 with shoe polish and fingernail polish.
And you found the same fingernail polish in his room. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was never released because you didn't have to use it.
Now, I know there was an 8 found underneath of his bed, but he also was in room 8, right?
Exactly. We matched the fingernail polish to the 8 on her leg. I don't know. Maybe he had a goal to get 8 people. Or it could be an infinity sign. But he won't slow him down.
Timothy Spencer would be found via DNA. There was incontrovertible proof that he had done this. His DNA was in multiple places and multiple murder scenes, and it all came back. The trial that really was the landmark trial, that was the precedent-setting trial where the DNA evidence was presented for the first time, was in Arlington. It was the murder case for Sue Tucker's murder, and it was in July of 1988. DNA could not be recovered in the murder of Carolyn Hom. It just hadn't been preserved. But back then, with the technology they had available, unfortunately, Carolyn Hom was the only murder they were not able to prosecute Timothy Spencer for. So as a result of this investigation, the governor pardoned David Vasquez after he had already been in prison for about 6 years. Timothy Spencer, at the time, the odds were 1 in 135 million that he was the person who had committed this murder. Timothy Spencer never confessed to the murders. It was proven by DNA. He was convicted. He was executed. And he went to his grave not saying a word, or so we thought. And it turned out that in doing some of my interviews, I found one of his former defense attorneys who says that Spencer did confess to one of the death row guards. And that's never been reported. I found a witness who claims that she had seen Timothy Spencer stalking Diane Cho at Cloverleaf Mall. A couple of Diane's friends told me that Diane had talked about having dreams about being followed, that she kept saying she felt like someone was following her.
One more time on that. The halfway house was supposed to monitor them and ensure
giving a voice to those 5 women who can't be with us, who can't tell us their stories, was incredibly important to me for this podcast. A lot of times the victims are sort of like Mr. Body and Clue. They're a device, and we hear more about the killer. I really thought it was very important to say these were real people. They had lives that were taken from them brutally, horribly. These women had great promise. I think they deserved a voice, and hopefully I gave them a little more of a voice than they've had in the past.